Senator, thanks so much for being here this morning.
My pleasure.
Now, if the House works through the weekend, the Senate would get a new resolution on Monday. Does that give you and your colleagues enough time to act before Tuesday's deadline, or is there simply not enough time left to avert a shutdown?
Well, I think there is time, but it depends absolutely on whether or not the Speaker of the House, Mr. Boehner, listens to his right-wing extremists, or whether he's prepared to work with other members of the House and come up with a reasonable approach. My concern right now is where we are at this moment should not be a debate about Obamacare. We can have that debate. It is, to my mind, a step forward. It's far from perfect. We should make improvements of it. The question is whether right-wing Republicans are prepared to hijack the American people, shut down the government, tell members of the military who are putting their lives on the line to defend this country that they may not get a paycheck or it'll be delayed. Tell mothers who are bringing their kids to Head Start today that that program may not be there in 2 weeks. You can have a debate on health care, but you don't just, bring the United States government to a halt, make us look like fools in front of the entire world, disrupt the economy in order to make a political point.
Now, I should mention we're looking at live pictures of the House floor there of Nancy Pelosi speaking right now, but I want to touch upon your reference to conservatives, to the extreme wing of the Republican Party. Thursday, House Republicans laid out their list of demands tied to the debt ceiling fight. The New York Times editorial board wrote about this. They refer to them as, quote, a Republican ransom note, policy ideas including things like oil drilling on federal lands and suing for medical malpractice. The president has gone so far as to say that they are trying to, quote, blackmail a president. So what do you make of their approach here in tying these policy proposals to the debt ceiling fight?
I mean, I really think it's a contempt for the Democratic process. Whether it's in terms of health care, where we passed the legislation, the Supreme Court upheld it. We had an election last year. This is what the Republicans ran on. They lost the presidential election. They lost seats in the Senate. They lost seats in the House. And now they're saying, yeah, I guess we lost the election, but we can bring the government to a halt. We can shut it down. You better give us our way. So I think what the New York Times is saying is basically right. What they're saying is, here is our long list. This is everything we want. You don't give us what we want, even though we don't have the White House, we don't have the Senate, we're going to shut down the government. I think it's anti-democratic. And I'll tell you something else. What I think people have got to understand is this whole debate over Obamacare is just a small part of what this right-wing agenda is about. Check it out. Most of these guys believe that we should abolish the minimum wage. They believe we should end Social Security. They believe we should get rid of the Environmental Protection Agency. They believe that we should privatize the Veterans Administration, Veterans Health Care. This is a right-wing extremist agenda funded by people like the Koch brothers, who are worth $70 billion, who have put hundreds of millions of dollars into the Tea Party, and who are pushing the goals of billionaires. People should understand that.
And, Senator, you were pretty fiery on the Senate floor earlier today. We played some of that sound in our open earlier. And oftentimes, in times like this, during these public showdowns, there'll be a lot of backroom maneuvering going on. Is that happening here right now, or are things really as bleak as they look?
I don't think that there is. And I think it's because it's what the president said. If you succumb to this kind of blackmail, not only is it unfair, not only is it anti-democrat, it sets a terrible precedent. We're going to have an election in a year. We're going to have a presidential election in 3 years. Do those elections mean anything? Or do the guys who lose the election say, the elections don't matter? We could shut down the government anytime we want in order to get our way. So I think what the president is saying, and I don't always agree with the president, but he's right on these issues. And it's not just government shutdown. It's whether or not, for the first time in the history of the United States of America, we pay the debts that we owe. Or we become scoffless. We become freeloaders, deadbeats. And that may mean a global financial crisis with, terrible job loss and so forth and so on. You can't be blackmailed. We can have democratic discussions. We have elections. But you can't say to the world, we're not going to pay our debts. You can't say to men and women in the military, they may not get paid because we just lost the election, and we want to bring up those issues now.
All right, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, thanks so much for your time this morning, sir.
Thank you.
Well, shifting gears now to the environment.